Welcome to episode 9 of Cleveland Metroparks Tales and Trails podcast. I'm Brian Zimmerman, the host, and with us today we have Katie Spotz. And I had a chance to meet Katie almost less than a week ago. Yep. And I'm like, hey, would you like to be on our podcast? And you enthusiastically said yes. And there's a reason why that we're trying to time this up with kind of the timing of our episodes and something that you're doing. But we're going to get into a whole bunch of things during this podcast. But, you know, if for those of you that don't know Katie, she's an endurance athlete. She's local. She's from Mentor, Ohio. She's trained on Lake Erie. She has used the Metroparks. One of the things that impressed me most is your journey kind of during the winter, which I want to get into a little bit. It kind of reminds me of a Survivor tour, coming across the park. But again, welcome to Cleveland Metroparks Tales and Trails podcast, episode 9.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here today.
So talk to us a little bit about your kind of connection to the Metroparks. I think that's what drew me to at least the interview.
Well, I feel like the Metroparks are my second home, and I have been in all the parks, hiking and running and cycling, and it really became a huge part of my training about a decade ago when I did my first Ironman, and we would constantly, through the group, be utilizing the Metroparks, and it's one of my favorite parts of Cleveland, and the emerald necklace and the fact that just when you think that it's over, it just keeps going, and it's a really special thing that we have access to the park system.
Well, again, it's so interesting. In our stop at Starbucks just over a week ago, there's a number of things that struck me, not only the Cleveland Metroparks, but the tie into fresh water and some of the things that you've tied in. And I think of William Stinchcomb, our founder. I think he'd be proud to know that you're here and the things that you've done, but the work that you're doing towards clean water, we're going to tie in. But I mean, you're really, you're an ambassador for Northeast Ohio. You're a triathlete. You're training for, event coming up here in the very near future, but truly, testing your skills. She's been featured in the New York Times, Sports Illustrated. You've been on the Joe Rogan show. Talk to me a little bit about what it was like to be on that.
Oh, it was very surreal. Yeah, it was. I was obviously very honored to have that opportunity, and he was amazing. He ended up sponsoring my next endurance challenge, which. The Metroparks was a part of that. I ran across the state of Ohio 11 ultramarathons in 11 days, finishing that, and it was a world record, finishing in Edgewater. So, yeah, he was supportive of that, and we helped over 10,000 people get clean water through that initiative. So I can't be more grateful for it.
So we're gonna kind of roll back just a little bit. What sparked your, I think, enthusiasm towards kind of this endurance side of things? We kind of sprinkled in a few things kind of along the way, but then we'll kind of get into this journey. But, what sparked you at the young age to really get involved in these high impact, high endurance things?
Yeah, I'm definitely an unlikely adventurer just because I played all the sports growing up, and the one position I played the most was the bench. I was more or less a bench warmer, and so I just kind of thought that the reason I was on the bench is because I belonged there and I wasn't an athlete. And so it was not until my senior year of high school I was signing up for a gym class, and I looked through the list, and the class that I thought would be the easiest would be this class called Walk, Jog, Run. Keyword walk. I was just like, I'm going to put in the least amount of effort and just kind of get on with life. And so it was that, being forced to be in that class. One of the weeks I just, the thought was there, can I run 1 mile straight, something I had never done, and with no pressure of letting down teammates or letting down a coach. It was really that first 1 mile, and it was no Nike moment. It wasn't like, oh, wow, I have these super running capabilities, but just knowing that, the limit was something I created in my head. And once I realized that there was room to explore what the limit really is, that opened a whole new world. And obviously you can take the things you learned through endurance in your real life too. So it was just, that's where the journey began. It was just, can I run 1 mile? And wow, it ends up that I can. And then it's curiosity that keeps me going. Can I run 2? Can I run 3?
And at what age was this? I mean, at what age did you, kind of make that pivot from
17, and then my first marathon was about a year later, 18. So.
And a marathon, are we talking half, or we just went all in and went 26.2?
I did. I went straight to 26.2. I think in one of my training runs, there was something about the double digits, and I did a 10-mile run, and so that gave me confidence to think that it might be possible. But yeah, and then when I did the race, in my mind, the whole story about a marathon is like someone sent a message and it was a marathon and then they died, right? So like in my mind, I was like, oh, it's the Kenyans that can do this. But once I did the race, I saw that there were people, in their 80s and 90s, there's all walks of life doing this, and it made me realize that it had a lot more to do with that, the internal drive than the physicality of it.
When you talk about your motivation, I mean, some of the things you've been able to accomplish along the way. I mean, youngest person to row solo across Atlantic, which we're going to get to. You've run nonstop across not just Ohio, but Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island. Talk to me about cycling, 375 miles in 24 hours. I mean, what type of caloric intake do you have to be able to accomplish something like that? And what motivates you when you're on mile 1 and then 2 and then you've got these next to come? Like what mentally prepares you to keep moving?
Yeah, if I didn't do endurance, I probably could be a competitive food eater, because there are days that, especially during races, that it can be burning through 10,000 calories in a day. It does take a lot of energy to convert food into a source of energy. And so I use a lot of liquids. Like I do a lot of the sports drinks. Tailwind is one of the sports drinks that does well with my system. And then supplementing that with some bananas and watermelon. But I really can go all day just on like these types of sports drinks, which is great.
So let's talk. Is there a binge food? I mean, are you eating, everybody's like pasta, chicken? I mean, you're talking sports drinks and bananas. I don't think I'd survive. I don't think I'd survive getting from breakfast to lunch, let alone, doing something like that. So is there a binge food that you like, or?
Well, I actually had a friend come for one of my races, and she made her motivation was a Big Mac, because I used to love eating a Big Mac, like French fries, have all that immediately after a race. Sometimes you have no appetite at all. So it really just depends on it. But yeah, definitely salty, fatty. That's the post-race craving, usually all the time.
So let's talk through. I mean, I would have eaten pasta or chicken or something like that. I think the farthest I've run is a 10K. So again, I'm super impressed with your overall motivation to keep things moving. But so you talk about the physical and kind of the food side to prepare, but mentally, knowing that you've been able to do your very first one, and then you've added on all these other wonderful things. But mentally, how do you get prepared to go into? So if somebody's like taking advice from you, what do they have to think about?
Yeah, so in some ways, the most difficult thing that I ever did was run my first 1 mile, not because it was physically difficult, but because there were so many mental barriers of like, who am I to think I could do this? And, just stories, right? That you get in your head and you let that narrative win. And so it is to the point where, like, I've heard all of those, oh, this is hard, oh, I don't want to do this. Like, I've heard it, and I've sat with it. And you really kind of, once you accept that can be part of the process and you could redirect it, like some of the things that I do now, even when it's very difficult, I will have a mantra, this is easy, this is so easy, I could do this all day. Even if my toenails are falling off, if I tell myself this is so difficult, it's only going to make things, that never made anything better.
Have you had your toenails fall off?
Oh yeah, I have one that still will never probably grow back correctly. That's a very common ultra running thing. Some ultra runners even go as far as getting them surgically removed permanently. So
that sounds very extreme. a very extreme thing.
Yeah. Luckily, I haven't gotten that far. But yeah, I think it's how you talk to doubt, really. And allowing it to be there, letting it have that space, and then it's not the driver. I hear you, but I'm not going to follow this, and then replacing that with something else. And I think what keeps me back is a lot of things. Curiosity is a big one, but it is also saying, if someone says I ran 1 mile, they usually add the word just. It was just 1 mile. And, to someone who can't walk and can never run, they would give anything to do that. So I never just, the ability to move our body is such a gift, a blessing, and something we all have, that not all of us have access to. So I really, I like to come from a place of gratitude because I know that it is a gift. And so it's very much I get to as well. You'll never hear me say I have to train because it is very much a choice. I get to. And so there's just so many little things that we can say that really make a difference with how we, walk through life. And so I just hope that I can come in a place of gratitude and excitement and curiosity for what is possible. And I mean, I do also get, there's this thing that happens sometimes where it's like, well, I could never run a marathon. Wow, that's so wild and crazy what you're doing. I could never do this. And truthfully, I thought that same thought too. And so the follow-up is usually like, oh, what marathon have you tried? And the answer is, I haven't. So you really don't know. Just because you think you can't do something doesn't mean you're right. And you never really know until you try. And I think the worst failure of all is not even trying. So even in your effort to try something you have never done before and you fail, there's still something worthy of celebrating the success of having the courage to try.
So with us today is Katie Spotz, and Tales and Trails podcast sponsored by KeyBank. Their 200th anniversary, which is hard to believe when you think of when they started. They just did their Heritage Center, and when you think of resilience and you think of all the things to go through all those different eras for 200 plus years, many different iterations. There's a lot to be learned from what they've done and the things that you've done. Let's pivot just a little bit and let's talk about the tie back to the Metroparks. How you've used the Metroparks. Let's talk about your kind of winter challenge, how you worked your way through the park district. That was a true inspiration because we've heard people, they start at Rocky River and it's like, oh, well, I got so far. And I'm like, well, you can go all the way. And you pushed it a little bit to the extreme because you chose the winter months, to kind of make your journey through. So, talk about what motivated you to go do that.
So, yeah, I love the fact that even though I've done adventures all around the globe, you really can find them in your own backyard. And one thing I do love about the Metroparks is you can go to the same park and it's completely different experience because of the seasons. So doing this long hike, I would love to do it again in the fall. So it was just knowing that this emerald necklace exists, this park after park after park. And I was training for Ironmans, and I would go maybe 20 miles out, 20 miles back. So I always knew you could go further. My friend and I, we set a personal challenge to try to do the entire emerald necklace in one weekend. So we did start on the east side. Friday night we did, I want to say about 15 miles. 15 to 20. Saturday, we did the bulk of it. We did 30, and then the rest on Sunday. So, yeah, we coordinated on our own, dropping one car at the end and then driving to the start. But, I mean, it was walking in a winter wonderland. It was so beautiful. It ended up being one of the, coldest weekends, but I think there's never bad weather. There's only bad gear. So as long as you're geared up, you really
Did you have the right gear, or did your friends have the right gear?
I might have had to phone a friend for hand warmers at one point. So, yeah, I think there was room to improve on some of the gear for me. But yeah, thankfully it was in over 3 days, so we can kind of, figure out what works and what doesn't. And
Anything surprise you on the journey? I heard you maybe did a little bit of a river crossing or something.
Right. Yeah. Bedford really threw us through a loop because there were multiple river crossings. And so we were so committed to doing this that we ended up scooting over like logs. And we couldn't help but crack up because the idea that here we are just hanging off the side of this log trying to get over a river, and then at night we're going to go back to our home. I mean, it's like having this ultimate crazy adventure and then going back to home. Yeah, I loved it. She loved it. And I mean, usually when there's an adventure, there's talk about what's the next adventure. And I think, once you start exploring and realizing how rich life can be when it's like, well, what else can we do? And it was beautiful. At night it was all lit up, like all the houses. And so I highly recommend it. If anyone wants to hike the entire Emerald Necklace, it's around 65, 70 miles, give or take, depending on.
Yeah, depending whether you divert off or
Right.
you move forward, you can come up Big Creek. There's lots of different ways. So I understand you're preparing for something else, and you're going to use one of the other probably more iconic assets of Cleveland Metroparks. We talked about Rocky River Reservation. One of the all-time favorites is the first 3 acres that came in Cleveland Metroparks. But you're going to use one of our iconic locations to do a little bit of training. So talk to our audience just a little bit about what you're tackling next.
So I am, in the fall, hiking Mount Kilimanjaro to raise money for clean water projects in Tanzania. And yes, Ohio is flat, but yes, it also does have some opportunities to do hill repeats and stair climbing. So this summer on solstice, the plan is to go to Fort Hill and climb those stairs. It will probably be 15 hours straight, the equivalent of Mount Kilimanjaro, so 19,000 feet of climbing. And
Just repeat that again. 19,000 feet for 15 hours going up and down Fort Hill stairs. I know.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about Earl, one of my friends, when we first opened it. We've talked about the Baldwin Wallace wrestling team using it, but I don't think anybody's taken it to that extreme. But part of this is raising money and raising awareness along the way for. And I love the fact that you mentioned Tanzania. One of the areas that the Cleveland Metroparks Zoo does conservation. Again, the tie-in from the coffee just less than a week ago to sitting here, it was so gravitating. And you talked about your mental health and your physical health and all those things, but it ties into why Cleveland Metroparks is so loved, and the fact that you're going to climb this thing for 15 hours straight, but you want people to kind of come along and raise money and raise awareness. So fill in the gaps for our listeners.
Yeah, so I always knew this water abundance growing up on Lake Erie. I just thought, it was, no matter who you were, you can have access to the water. And it wasn't until I was living in Australia and they were experiencing a drought, and I started learning more about their water issues that it kind of, it was the Pandora's box. And then I started learning about global water issues. And at the time, it was 1 in 6 people didn't have access to clean water. And for me to be 20-something, not knowing about the daily struggle of over 1 billion people, I just got goosebumps now. And, we can't all agree to everything, but I think we all can agree that everyone everywhere should have the access to water. And I mean, it was just as daunting, if not more, than any endurance challenge. And I think it's, it kind of is a metaphor for how the water crisis. It is just one drop at a time, one person at a time, 1 mile at a time, one moment at a time. So I was able to combine this passion for clean water with endurance, and with the support of many, many people. We've helped 47,000 people gain access to clean water. And so, yes, these adventures may last a day, a week, a month, but the impact does last a lifetime. And it's just really exciting because we can change this problem. There are some problems that we can't. We don't have the research. We still need funding for finding solutions, and there are solutions to this problem, and you can see it. And so on my website, I have on Google Earth the pins and all the information, so you can see pictures, you can see the impact that you can make. And I mean, how can you not want to do more when you know change is possible? And yeah, it's the first step out of a life of poverty. So if you care about environment, it's water. If you care about kids, they can go to school and get an education. So if you care about youth, if you care about women empowerment, if you care about, there's so many issues that if you care about that, it's easy to want to support clean water because.
Yeah, I think of Aaron Huber, 4 miles for water. You think of the jug, and you
Exactly.
think of, how long it takes. And when you see, if you've never traveled and you've been in other parts of the world, and you see how precious it actually is, and you see the distances that people travel for fresh water,
Right.
and how precious the resource. And then you pivot to, the fact that you grew up in Mentor, Ohio. We're on Lake Erie, and, we have abundance of riches with, Lake Erie being here, the tributaries. You're going to be training at Fort Hill Stairs. So let's pivot just a little bit. So you use Lake Erie to train. Your book, Just Keep Rowing, which I found some very unique excerpts about this. I mean, traveling across the ocean for approximately 70 to 100 days. I was fascinated about and mortified about the boat accident, Liv ending up on the rocks. I mean, some of these things that happened to you, and people kind of chuckle about Lake Erie, but I was just there this morning, and Lake Erie was angry. It was a northwest coming in, and the waves were crashing up onto the road. But how did you, one, why did you do it? Two, how did you prepare yourself? And then let's talk through a couple of the things, seasickness and manta rays and, loneliness. Let's talk through all. I mean,
Sure.
it's fascinating.
Yeah. So I had no rowing experience.
And wait a minute, you decided to do something like this
Yes.
with no experience.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna try to rationalize, how I ended up there. I didn't have rowing experience. I didn't have any, boating experience, and here I was with this dream to row across the Atlantic. So while I was living in Australia, it was just a conversation on a bus, and someone was telling me about endurance challenges, and he mentioned that his friend had just rowed across the Atlantic. And, I thought I was maybe with the endurance world, maybe it was, I was a know-it-all. I thought I heard all the adventures you can have, biking around the world, sailing around the world, climbing the tallest mountains, but it just captured my imagination. So I went home and I Googled it to see if they were kidding or if it was real. And once I saw that this was a real thing that people were doing, I found myself researching. And then that research turned into wondering. And it captured my imagination in a way that I just wanted to know. I wanted to know what it felt like for myself. I wanted to know, there is an element of whatever problem you're facing, you can avoid it. But when you're rowing an ocean by yourself, you really have to find that internal drive. And I wanted to be forced to be in a situation where the only option was to overcome. There was no, can this person do it for me? There was no, it was make it. I just had to make it. I just had to figure it out. And I don't know. I just wanted to see how far.
So you did it.
I did it.
So you did it, but you trained on Lake Erie,
Yes.
you crashed a boat.
Yes.
I mean, walk us through. So you got prepared, and then you started out, and I mean, how did it go?
So I think the most difficult part might have been training on Lake Erie. I did get in a pretty significant accident, and it was the last training row before the crossing. And so when I was taking those first few oar strokes in Africa, those were on a boat that I hadn't rowed since the accident.
Oh,
So
wow. I
it
didn't know
was
the
a new
timing was
boat.
that close.
It was like a new...
But you had to get it
so-
repaired. So it went up on the
Yes,
rocks. You had to get it
yes,
repaired
yes.
and then get it shipped.
Yeah, and I mean, that was probably it seemed like the logical thing would be to quit at that moment, especially with such a public and epic failure. But I just knew that at the end of the day, I didn't want to be 80 years old, 90 years old, looking back at my life, wondering what if. And the truth is, if you start neglecting the things you're called to do, that can become a habit. And then years go by and you're like, well, how did I end up here? And so I didn't want to make a habit of ignoring it. And I think if you do ignore callings in your life, then you won't be called to do it because it'll just be stuffed down and you can't hear it anymore. So
I think that's one of the reasons why I've loved being here at Cleveland Metroparks. Coming from Milwaukee, 15,000 acre park system, people ask, oh, don't you? And I said, I love being here. I love the team that I get to work with every single day. I love the impact. I don't think about the what ifs. We fall forward.
Right.
Every day. It's like, how do we move forward? How do we move forward to this community? And the mental toughness you need. I mean, there are days that things are coming at you. For instance, I think your seasickness. You had to kind of battle that, didn't you? You get
Yes.
stung by things coming up.
Man of Wars.
Man of Wars.
Yes, getting hit by flying fish. I had dolphin visits, shark visits, 25-foot waves, a boat that I thought could potentially be a pirate. I mean, close calls with oncoming freighters. But for the most
Like they didn't
part,
see you? I mean, like...
you get on your VHF radio and they don't respond. So the thing is, when you're looking at the radar, it gives you a range, right? Like they could be on this path, but they could also be on this path. So you can't outrow it. Mm-hmm. You just have to kind of
here's what's going to happen.
It might happen.
Yeah.
I might get run over by a freighter. And so
you don't mentally prepare for that then. You're just like, oh, well, if this is going to happen.
Well, I mean, I did work with a sports psychologist and Jack Lessick, shout out to him. He's local here. And so we did walk through every worst case scenario. And I mean, we all knew that I was risking my life. And saying goodbye to my family at the airport was so difficult. We all knew that might be the last time.
And you still did it anyway. I mean, your mental toughness to push through. And how many days was it? It was
70.
70. So you hit the 70 because you thought maybe 100 it might take you, but you did it in 70. But how did you eat? I mean, did you get hungry? And then I heard you had a bird on the boat that you kind of didn't know what to do with.
Yeah, he stayed. He stayed for a few days. So I did. The boat was 400 pounds, fully loaded. It was 1,000. You wanted to try to keep your weight as low as possible. And the way you could do that is by having freeze-dried meals. So it wasn't like an MRE where there's liquid. You just have a jet boil stove. You have a desalinator that converts the salt water into drinking water. So you have these freeze-dried meals. So that would be like breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then lots of snacking.
Were you ever worried about running out of food? That would be me. I'd be like, man, I'm going to get hungry at some point in time.
Well, you find little ways to motivate yourself, and sometimes that's chocolate. And the only thing I ran out of was Snickers because that was like, out of all the chocolate bars, the one that I would go to the most. But no, I didn't run out of anything else other than the Snickers bar because I anticipated it would be potentially 100 days. And so I had...
So you ate a few too many too early,
yes,
is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I did not ration that, but I ended up my weight staying the same, and I think I might have put on more muscle mass. But yeah, you do see people spending months at sea, and then they come back, and you're like, where's the rest of them? But I was able to maintain my weight even though I was doing all of that. Rowing.
So let's talk about your mental health. I mean, 70 days, you essentially had no contact. I mean, you were journaling and chronologuing, and I think you had some Twitter. You had some ways, but no real communication. Like, how do the thoughts go through your head? I mean, I think I would recycle them because there's probably only so many things going on, but, that's a long time. That's 2.5 months, essentially, right?
Yes. So I did engage my mind with, like, podcasts and audiobooks, and I had... I only had so much comedy, So at the end of the day, my treat or reward would be listening to a comedy show. So there were ways that I was still, mentally having that kind of distraction. But I will say I was pretty exhausted. And when you're in an exhausted state, like it's dulled down. Like you're not thinking clearly. I didn't sleep for 8 hours ever. Like not even one night. So I was severely sleep deprived just because the waves constantly hit my boat and I'd wake up.
Let me ask you this. So you're sleeping-ish.
Yeah.
But you went forward, right? So oftentimes did you go backwards or did you try to plan the winds to be able to keep you moving forward? Like that's one of the things I didn't quite understand. I'm like,
yeah. So I worked with the weather guy and the prevailing winds and currents went so that it would help.
I got it.
There were times
So there was strategy.
Yes, absolutely. If I went in reverse, I would be blown back to land every day.
Yep.
So I did do that. There were times I did lose my entire day's work, but I had a para-anchor, which is like an underwater parachute that minimizes...
Yep, the drag. It's a drag, essentially.
Right, yep. So that was really the only thing I could do about that. But yes, I usually was helped rather than hurt in that situation. But yeah, it would have been maybe like 2,600 miles if I was exactly straight. So there were some squigs.
Some diversion. So with us again today is Katie Spotz. I'm Brian Zimmerman, the host of Tales and Trails podcast, sponsored by Key Bank. We're in the Cleveland Metroparks studio. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, lessons learned or, challenging that, maybe a young person or maybe somebody that's, more middle-aged, like what would you recommend to them and say, and I think I kind of know, it's like, you don't know until you try, right? But, how do you try to motivate others through what you've been able to do?
Well, the good news is you don't need to be motivated to do a lot of these things. You're allowed to feel afraid, intimidated. You could feel the fear and do it anyways. I think a part of why things are so difficult is because we expect to have that feeling of motivation before we do the action. But every run, usually I don't feel like running the first 10 minutes.
Isn't that true?
But,
that's almost always true. It's like, why am I doing this?
Yes. And so motivation shows up when you do. So I very much just want to encourage others that whatever they're feeling can be overcome if it's, preventing you from living a life that you want to. It's normal and natural, and you can work through it. Reminding people that they're more capable than they think, and that just because you think you can't do something, it doesn't mean you're right. You really there's only one way to find out.
Has something surprised you about, your journey from, the very first mile till now, something that surprised you about yourself? Or
I think with the row, just because I spent that, there was no follow boat. And I was very...
For those of you who don't know, the follow boat is literally the lifeline to the world. You did this by yourself, solo crossing.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the assumption that there's like a follow boat. And sometimes there is. Mm-hmm. I just, it was like $30,000. And I was like, that's a lot of money that could help people with clean water. So I was really intentional about trying to get as much money. And truthfully, if I did have a follow boat and I could quit like that, like snapping my fingers, I might have. So the fact that I would have to wait potentially 48 hours if I called for help, and in 48 hours, I probably would feel fine. Like that's how, it was an emotional roller coaster. I could feel on top of the world and then 2 hours later feel like having a meltdown. But I think I was always worried about the solitude and feeling lonely. Right? Like there's a lot of ways we can distract ourselves from feeling lonely. And so I was worried about that. And what encouraged me about that is even if I was thousands of miles away, I did feel the presence of those that I love, and that spending time alone could be this this time for introspection, and it could be something to kind of celebrate rather than something to avoid. So I was surprised and grateful that it didn't feel lonely, even though I was alone. And there's a lot of beauty in solitude.
And I think that's the tie back, the 25,000 acres of Metroparks, whether you're by yourself, whether you're running with a group, whether you're training at Fort Hill Stairs, whether you're cycling across the Emerald Necklace, it meets you where you're at the time. And I think when I hear your kind of journey, the Metroparks has been part of it. And I think that was the draw that, the inspiration partly is because of the Metroparks existing here, you're able to do some of these things and train in very different ways that, this isn't as common as people think. The Metroparks are very unique to Northeast Ohio.
Right. I mean, I've never gone to the Metroparks and not felt better after. I've never regretted a moment that I spent in the Metroparks, and some of these amazing memories were created in the Metroparks. And I could go to the same park. Just because I did live in Lakewood for many years, I would go to the same park, but you always see something new, and it really never gets old. And so there is a lot of joy in what I'm doing simply because I have this space to constantly explore.
So besides June 21st, the solstice, where you're climbing the stairs for 15 plus hours, what other projects are in the works besides, kind of raising money and awareness? What's Katie going to be up to?
Well, I did sign up for a Spartan ultra run.
You carry a spear and like a shield, or what happens here?
This is my first one. I don't know. Usually I did the thing again where you don't sign up for a half marathon or a 5K. I did a marathon before I did a 5K race, and
it seemed like the right thing to do, right?
I mean, so
you're an all in. So if you go to Vegas, you just put the chips all in right away, correct?
I mean, I don't know. I signed up for the ultra, and so it's 31 miles of running, 60 obstacles, and it's here in Garrettsville. So that's the shorter term next thing. It's a lot of preparing for Kilimanjaro and just finding ways for people to be involved and to really use that as a platform for good and helping make sure that people can get clean water. So,
what's your favorite spot, Katie, in the Metroparks? If you had to pick one spot.
I go to Edgewater almost every day. I was in the Coast Guard, and I always love being on near water. So, that's my immediate favorite. But yeah, I also like to say that my favorite part is the place I've never explored, because that's the fun and the magic, is that there's a almost limitless ability to do that here in the Metroparks.
Well, again, thank you, Katie, so much for joining us on the Tales and Trails podcast presented by KeyBank. An absolute inspiration for others when you think of the no limit. And, it's like, well, I could start here, but I'm going to go here. And I love the fact that, I've kind of live my life with the foot on the gas. And I think that's how you get to where you want to get to. And we can't thank you enough for being a champion of Northeast Ohio. I heard you may have a couple questions from our visitors, or you may have your own or something.
So volunteering. Tell me more about the opportunities in the Metroparks and what impact it has on the park system.
Well, first and foremost, we are so blessed with, over 20 million visitors, annually each year to the Metroparks. And, that's recreation visits, golf visits, zoo, hiking, biking, all those wonderful things. But we celebrate our volunteers, often. And when we think of, not only our commissioners, our three commissioners, Bruce Rinker, Dan Moore, and Yvette Itu, they're volunteers as well. So they're here for the sole purpose. But we have folks that do recycling. We have trail ambassadors. We can't thank our volunteers enough. They make us better. They're our advocates. They continue to talk and tell the story of what's going on. And so we want them to be as well informed as possible. Folks like KeyBank, they do Days of Caring and Get Out the Red campaign. They're out there, pulling garlic mustard at Wendy Park Whiskey Island. Moen, one of your sponsors, longtime company here. We're so blessed with so many that want to give back to the Park District.
Awesome. And then one more question I have is I do have the app, so that's kind of one place I like to find out what's going on in the Metroparks. But what's the best way and place to find out what's going on.
And I hate to be cliche, our website, but part of it is that I think there are, when you think of the Metroparks, the Emerald Necklace, it's really here. I talk about this 8, 80, or 8. Whether you're 8 years old or 80, you should have an 8-minute walk or ride. And so one of the things that I've tried to live by here and guide us is how do we continue to connect? Sometimes it's the best through word of mouth. There are so many people that tell stories about the park, and so whether you show up at Rocky River Nature Center, North Chagrin, play golf. There are so many people that know things. Certainly our website, can be the default to find those things. But like you parked your car, you parked your other car, and you said, hey, we're gonna go through this. And certainly the app helps because, we've done a lot of wonderful mapping along the way. But just get out, get active. It's your time, your place. It's your place to go explore and use the wonderful Cleveland Metroparks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for being on episode 9 of Tales and Trails podcast, sponsored by KeyBank, celebrating their 200th year here in Northeast Ohio. Thank you so much.
Thank you.